Greetings, Tabernacle family. It's good to be back again. We are going to be jumping right back into the book of James, chapter 1, right where we left off. So we're in verses 19 and 20. And James tells us this: Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. So I'd really like to take some time to break down each and every one of these sections, because I think that there is a great amount of wisdom really packed into these two verses. And so let's start and take a look at that very first verse, verse 19, where we have three very clear directives given to us by James. And so the first one is, he says to be quick to hear. I know I'll speak for myself. I usually want to be the first person heard. I don't want to hear what somebody else has to say. And the reality is I wind up missing out on a lot of really good things that other people have to say, unless I can really get a hold of myself and really focus myself in on what other people are saying. In fact, when it comes to political years like we have this year with the 2020 election cycle, there's a lot of people talking over one another, and we really don't have a lot of people listening right now. And I really want to encourage us as Christians to listen to what people are saying before we really try to respond in any sort of way, especially because in our current situation with social media and the technology that we have available to us, a lie can travel around the world much quicker than the truth can. And so we hear something and we tend to be reactionary. And I want to really have an opportunity to look at the difference between being reactionary and being responsive. See, as Christians, we're not called to be reactionary. We're called to be responsive, okay? And Proverbs gives us a very interesting insight. There's a lot of really great stuff in Proverbs, but in this little piece here about being quick to listen, I really want to zoom in on Proverbs 18:17. And it says this: the one who states his case first seems right. And that's me. I mean, if I'm going to be real here, is that I like to be the first to state my case, right? And we hear something, and immediately we assume it to be absolute truth, absolute fact, and we react to the very things we hear. But see, Proverbs 18:17 doesn't stop there. It says, until the other comes and examines him. When we hear things, we need to not just jump on top of the first thing we hear, but we actually need to explore things. I've seen some great memes on all over social media, and like some of my favorite ones are when you see like a picture of Abraham Lincoln, and then there's a quote by him that says, "Do not believe everything you read on Facebook." Because the joke is, of course, I mean, Abraham Lincoln is like so many years before Facebook ever even existed, right? And we have that real bad habit of, we see something on social media, we immediately see it as fact. And it's interesting, there's actually a word that's out there that's been misapplied. It's a word called a factoid, right? And most people think that a factoid is a small fact, but a factoid is actually a piece of information that has not been explored to see whether it stands up to scrutiny of it being true or not. And we have to be really cautious not to jump at factoids. Don't jump at the very first thing that we hear. Allow that information to be cross-examined, to be explored, to see if there's really any truth to it. A couple of suggestions I can make is this. As you're talking with people, instead of making statements, ask questions. It's amazing. And ask questions with intentionally listening to the answers. Again, I'll throw myself under the bus. I can have an easy habit of asking a question, and I hear half an answer, and I've already got a response to it, and I miss everything else that other person is saying because I'm just waiting for them to stop speaking so I can pounce on the first thing they said, where they may have actually explained it out a lot better if I had listened to the second or third portion of the things that they were saying. And so one of the things that we need to do when we listen and we're quick to listen, it means that we ask good questions and we intently listen to the questions. And in fact, one of the really good ways of doing intentional listening is also follow-up questions, where you can actually respond back and say, so what I heard you say is, and then whatever it is, am I getting that right? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Can you unpack that a little bit more for me? And what human nature tends to respond to is being understood. See, everybody wants to be understood. And so when you give that opportunity to understand somebody else, they may actually be more open to hearing what you or I have to say. And, one of the other questions that I like to ask, especially based on who it is I'm speaking with, is I'll even ask, can I comment on that topic? Can I make a comment on that? Do you mind if I speak to that? And it gives people the opportunity to actually give you permission to have an opinion on the things that they're talking about. It shows dialogue, it shows respect, and really that's a lot of what we ought to be doing in Christianity, is responding and not reacting. So first, we're called to be slow to speak. Okay, too quick to hear, rather. Next is slow to speak. When I am in the heat of the moment, I have to remind myself to count to 10. It's amazing when you just take a moment and compose yourself and remind yourself that this is another person who bears the image of God that you're having a conversation with, that you want to actually engage with people and not get into just a confrontation with people. And so we want to be slow to speak. Give it a count to 10. Even more so when we're dealing with electronic communication. I mean, this is a thing that I was taught once, and somebody told me, when you're responding to an email, and especially if that email that you're responding to felt like it had the feeling of being attacking you, you can type out a response, but wait 24 hours. I mean, unless it's an email that requires an immediate response back, wait 24 hours. Then go back and reread it. And you'll probably find that there are certain areas of it that you may want to tweak, and maybe you want to wind up being a little bit more diplomatic in your language and whatnot. One of the other things that I find is have accountability people. Whenever I'm sending an email out or a text message, there is no opportunity to put voice inflection into a text message or an email. There's no face, so people can't see the facial expressions that you have, and so you really have a lot less control on how somebody will perceive the information that you're trying to give to them. And so you want to be very careful about it. A lot of times I will type an email up or a text message, and I'll show it to my wife and ask her to review it and ask her really hard questions. Did that come off the wrong way? How did you understand what I meant when I said that? How does it read to you? Is this something that you would send? And there's plenty of times that you can ask a spouse, ask a good friend, to just review your communication. You don't have to be right on top of responding every single time. Okay. A couple of questions also that I do like to ask myself when I am responding to social media posts is this: what happens if I don't comment? I mean, is my commentary on somebody else's post like critical to their life? Is this going to be a life changer for somebody? What happens if I do comment? Do the pros outweigh the cons? Is there a better chance that I will have shown somebody the love of Christ by making a comment, or will I have not shown Christian love to them. Is this a truth that leads them to the gospel message, or is this a truth that leads them to a particular political party truth? There's just so many good opportunities to think about the pros and cons of whether you do put a comment or don't put a comment. One of the other ones I ask is, what role does this person have in my life? Sometimes we're on, I don't know, a Christian magazine's post on social media, and somebody who I've never met and I'll never communicate with again, I see something they put on there, and I feel the need to get in there and tell them something. And I mean, who is this person really? I mean, what is this really going to do for them? And what is it going to do for the witness that we're supposed to be carrying? So we're to be quick to hear, we are to be slow to speak, and then we are to be slow to anger. And in Ephesians 4:26-7, it says, "Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil." And this has been a debate throughout all of Christianity as to whether or not Christians can be properly, righteously angry. I always like to think about when I'm watching television and all of a sudden the SPCA commercial comes on. You get the weepy Sarah McLachlan song is playing, and you see the puppy dog eyes. And so I think about it like you watch that commercial and your heart is just torn for the animals, right? And so you whip out your checkbook and you write the check and you send it, and you get on social media and you tell everybody how you believe that we got to take care of the animals. And somebody that didn't ask the questions about when and when not to comment on somebody else's social media, they tell you about how your money could have been better spent by supporting kids through World Vision or another organization. And so then you go from this righteous anger of seeing animals hurt, and all of a sudden you're into this self-righteous anger of telling this person about how dare they think about telling you how to spend your money, and they're so wrong. And it's amazing how quickly godly righteous anger can turn into self-righteous anger. And in fact, two of the big names in the Reformation period Christianity, Augustine of Hippo says this: "It is better not to allow anger, however just and reasonable, to enter at all, than to admit it in ever so slight a degree. Once admitted, it will not be easily expelled, for, though at first but a small plant, it will immediately grow into a large tree." Augustine felt that human nature could not handle staying righteously angry. He said, man, don't even go there. Now, on the flip side, Thomas Aquinas actually argued for the ability to have righteous anger. And in fact, he said that it's sinful in some instances not to get angry when we should. He called this unreasonable patience. The reality is, if our kids are acting in a sinful way, we should get angry and we should correct them. But he also addresses the other ways that anger can be sinful. So the first way is that he says if you don't get angry when you should, but on the flip side he says this: if you get angry over the wrong things, that would be sin. It makes me wonder what his statements would be sometimes if you saw some of the arguments that Christians get into over politics, right? He also says that it would be sinful if you have wrong motives. So there's wrong objects of anger, there's wrong motives for anger. And then finally he says that when anger becomes too fierce, so you haven't kept it in check. It's interesting when we look at the word meek, and Jesus uses that word. The Greek word is praeus, and the idea of it is great strength under God's control. And this is exactly what Thomas Aquinas is talking about, is that it becomes sinful when you allow that great strength of righteous anger to fall outside of the realm of God's control. And which leads us then to the second verse of our passage today, that the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. And I just want to take a quick look in the Old Testament to give a little glimpse of kind of what that looks like. We're going to be looking real briefly over at Numbers chapter 20. We look at the story of Moses, and Moses was not always a willing participant in God's plan, and yet God used him mightily. And as they've defeated the chase of the Egyptians through the Dead Sea, the Red Sea rather, crashing in on them, we see time and time again that the Israelites just drive Moses batty. And one of the earliest examples that we have of this is in Exodus 17. They've run out of water. Moses has already found a well that's bitter, and God gives him direction on how to make the water not bitter anymore. And now they've moved on, and they've run out of water. And God tells Moses to strike the rock. And when he strikes the rock, water comes pouring out. Now, that's Exodus. We go all through the rest of Exodus, and we get into the book of Numbers, right? And we have a couple of accounts in Leviticus, and we get into the book of Numbers, and we see that there's so much they've gone through now. They've sent their spies into the promised land, and the majority of the people shoot down Caleb and Joshua's suggestion that they go and take the land because God is with them, right? And so then they're told by God that nobody is going into the promised land if you're under 20 except Joshua and Caleb, right? And Moses is at this point still okay to go there. But then we have the rebellion of Korah. We have the challenge of Aaron, and this is where Aaron's rod winds up budding leaves and almonds and whatnot. And then finally, again, they come to Moses because they're thirsty again. And God, this is in chapter 20 of Numbers, and I want to read this directly. It says, "Now there was no water for the congregation, and they assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron. And the people quarreled with Moses and said, 'Would that we had perished when our brothers perished before the Lord. Why have you brought the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness, that we should die here, both we and our cattle? And why have you made us come up out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It is no place for grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink.'" Now you got to imagine that Moses is just livid. He's had it. How many different ways does he have to show these people miracles through the power of God, that God is directing this whole thing? So Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the entrance of the tent of meeting and fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take the staff and assemble the congregation, you and Aaron your brother, and tell the rock before their eyes to yield its water. So you shall bring water out of the rock for them, and give drink to the congregation and their cattle." And Moses took the staff from before the Lord as he commanded him. Then Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, "Hear now, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock?" And Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock with his staff twice, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank and their livestock. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not believe in me, to uphold me as holy in the eyes of the people of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them. These are the waters of Meribah, where the people of Israel quarreled with the Lord, and through them he showed himself holy." Now, Moses is angry. He has had it with the people. God tells him, "Go to the rock and tell the rock to bring forth water." Because Moses has gone to God and said, "What am I supposed to do?" And he's already, I want to suggest, he's not listening to all of the answer. He thinks he knows what God wants, and he's angry, and he goes and he strikes the rock again. Now, the rock does bring water forward, but the problem is this: he doesn't realize the message that he's sending. Many scholars believe that in Exodus 17, when Moses strikes the rock and the water pours forth, that this is an image of Christ, the Messiah, being struck down for us, bringing forward living water. But Jesus Christ is only to be struck down once. We're told this throughout the New Testament, especially in the book of Hebrews. And so when Moses asks God a quick question, gets half the answer, doesn't bother paying attention to the rest of the answer, goes and does what he thinks he knows to do in anger, he sends a wrong message of the Messiah being struck twice. The anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. How many times do we operate in anger and we wind up not even realizing at the time the bad message that we send? Well, I'll tell you, Tabernacle family, it's been fun these last 2 weeks looking at the book of James with you. I am looking forward to Pastor Paul picking it up again next week. Until that time, be well, everybody.